I couldn't have wished for a better life. I've been extremely fortunate. I'll say that to anybody. I mean it with total sincerity. I mean, Formula One for many people must be a wonderful opportunity in which to participate. There's no one can relax if you're perched, when you perch somewhere near the top. And for those of us trying to get back up there, we can't relax either. So it's a very demanding, taxing sport in many ways, but it's very worthwhile to the spirit and eventually to the pocket if you get it right.
Very sad news broke over the weekend that Sir Frank Williams has died. And who better to pay a tribute to that man than the 1996 world champion, our very own Damon Hill, who of course won that title in a Williams. Damon, lovely to have you with us, albeit briefly today. Your memories of Frank.
You say who better to talk about Frank, but actually I was one of so many people who Frank played an important part in their careers. Obviously, the entire Williams team. I saw a tribute from Dickie Stanford. Obviously, he was one of the team managers back in the day and worked with Frank right from the very early days. And there'll be so many people whose lives were touched by his organisation, his determination to succeed, and his love of motor racing, because everything at Williams was geared towards producing a race-winning car. And no expense was wasted on frivolity. You know, there was, if you say to Frank, we've got a great idea for a launch, just go, how much would it cost? And that could go on another 50 laps of a car testing at Estoril. So yeah, lots and lots of people's lives were positively affected by his amazing energy and dedication to producing fantastic racing cars.
And Damon, something that I think and feel is unique to Sir Frank and the whole Williams family is this sense of a family effort. You know, we're talking Ginny paying bills that they couldn't afford. You know, you hear the stories about going into the telephone box because the phone had been disconnected. You know, this is a family that really pulled together and came through to be hugely successful. Do you ever think we'll see something like that again in Formula One?
Well, I don't think it can happen anymore, but it was more possible back then than it is now. And so he was a founder. He was motivated by, to call him an amateur sounds like an insult, but an amateur really means someone who does it for the love of it. And he would go through hell and pain and poverty and anxiety and stress, as did Ginny, the whole family. They went through all the hard times to get to where they were. And when they got to where they were, suddenly they were surrounded by people who wanted to help and want to be part of the show. So they were quite protective of Team Willie, as it was called by them. It was a family story, and it was very much motivated by this slightly obsessed man called Frank Williams.
How would you describe your relationship with him, and how did it evolve from the first time you met him?
I would say I was slightly in awe of him because clearly when I was on the way up, they were a dominant world-beating team. And so, you know, they were right up there. And if you had any hopes and desires to be a racing driver and win Grand Prix, then to be with Williams was about the ultimate. You know, there was them and McLaren, and all these guys were, Ron and Frank were almost godlike people. So when I first went to see Frank, it was about the test drive. I got Patrick. I think I found it easy to chat with Patrick because I could talk springs and dampers. Typical men, you know, we could avoid the kind of tricky emotional content by talking about inanimate objects together. But Frank was quite austere. He didn't give much away. It wasn't like you could get into a chat like we're doing now with Frank. You had to be talking about something relevant. So I was quite in awe of him.
I think actually anyone who had the pleasure of meeting him was in awe of him. I totally agree with that. Not least because of this tenacity and determination that he showed after the accident. I mean, to give listeners some idea, Damon, of just how tough that was, he's been living and functioning incredibly well considering the impact of his injuries back in 1986 and was able to achieve such success, yet inhibited by these physical injuries.
No, he was a total inspiration to anybody who's had any kind of setback because he absolutely refused to feed off any pity or sympathy. He wasn't interested in that. He saw it as a challenge. And so he was very disciplined, as he was before his accident. You know, he was a very keen athlete, didn't drink, no alcohol, no, stimulants. He just drank tea. And, so when he had this accident, he basically applied all of that discipline to keeping himself in shape for a tetraplegic.
And Damon, could you have a laugh with Frank? I mean, in the years since you stopped driving for him, have you ever had a laugh about the way your Williams career ended? Did you ever talk about it? Did he ever explain how it came about?
Yeah, I don't think I had a particularly a laugh about the way it ended. I mean, I think it was shrouded in mystery, and there's various different angles as to how you interpret it. But I think he did. Well, the way he explained it to me was when he phoned up and said, "Listen, I've got to do what's right for the team, and I'm very sorry that means you're not going to be retained for next year." And what can you say? You knew his primary focus and concern was the future of the team, and if I didn't play a part in that strategy, then that's that. And so there's never any hard feelings. And as far as laughs go, I mean, we had some great times. He was a very cheeky person. I think Mark Hughes did his obituary on him and referred to him as mischievous and cunning and cheeky. He was all those things. He was a charmer as well. He could charm people into giving him what he wanted. They would go out of a meeting feeling like they've had a great time, and then realize later that he's got the upper hand on the deal. So he could turn on the charm. So we did have some chuckles, and probably the most favorite moment for me was sitting outside the Williams motorhome back in the day before they were kind of 3-story hotel complexes. This is just a coach with an awning parked on the grass in the paddock, behind the paddock at Silverstone, as the sun went down on a beautiful 1994 July day, with the trophy on the table just in front of him and me on the other side just signing autographs, and him just supping on his tea, and he was just a big wide grin on both of our faces. So we had some lovely times.
One of my most enduring memories of him was 2012 when Pastor Maldonado won for the team. And of course, we were celebrating his 70th the same weekend. And the pure joy within the team, that was contrasted by the horror of the fire. But then to see the team pull together, and indeed other members of the paddock go down and put the fire out, it was just such an emotionally charged weekend. But I'll never forget it.
No, I mean, clearly, it was the best birthday present he could ever have got. Not the fire, but the race win. Yeah, a lot happened to Williams that weekend, didn't it? He delighted in everything that Formula One could offer, or motorsport could offer. He loved the cars, he loved the speed. And the irony for me was that he hated paying drivers. He thought the money was wasted. It could have gone on the car. And,
well, he's right.
Him and Ginny... Well, I would take a different view, but I would say we're worth our weight in gold. But him and Ginny, they had the opinion that drivers are just employees. Well, I would take issue with him on that. So whilst on the one hand he would kind of slightly denigrate or downgrade the drivers as being important, he absolutely was in awe of drivers. He completely stood in awe of every single driver he had driving for him. He would have loved to have been a racing driver, like all of those guys. They would have loved to actually been in their car driving it. Who wouldn't? Like Jack Brabham built and won in his own cars. That and Bruce McLaren. That's probably about as close as you can get to heaven in our sport. But Frank was sadly denied that ability.
So Damon, just in summary, what have you lost from a personal point of view, and what has the sport lost with the passing of Frank Williams?
Well, I don't think it's a loss. I think you have to look at it. What Frank brought to the pot of our sport was a story of a man who started with nothing, and through sheer guts and determination built a world-beating team with a record that will stand in the record books. And is still there today as one of the most successful Formula One teams of all time. And also his record as a human being, his tenacity and his wiliness and all the things, his attributes that made him an extraordinary person. So that's part of the F1 story. He's left us with that. And, we only get one go at this, one span. And I think he persisted or survived an extraordinary amount of time against all the odds, and sadly, sooner or later, it was going to overwhelm him. But I mean, he lived a full life, and he lived to see his grandchildren as well. And I think one of the lovely stories that Claire told was how happy he was to go to his grandchildren's shows. And he seemed to be enjoying it, Claire said, as much as the children. So that's rather a lovely thought, isn't it? That he was delighting in his new life as a granddad.
Oh, so true. I mean, a family man to the very end. And I think that's part of his legacy, isn't it? That the F1 family as a whole, and I'm talking about the fans, I'm talking about the core in the paddock and every supporter of the sport. There wasn't anyone who didn't love Williams. I mean, that's a real testament to him, Claire, and the team as a whole, that even if they weren't your first choice team, they'd definitely be your second. But they were just loved universally, still are.
And I think also they're quintessentially British, Natalie. You know, so if you're looking for a team GB, I think that more than perhaps even McLaren, I would say that Williams was Team GB. I mean, you know, I've compared Frank to Enzo. You know, in Italy they've got Enzo Ferrari, someone who was as dedicated to his cars and racing as Frank was. But I would say Frank was comparable in that way, and I found a member of a eponymous team, which the name will live on. I mean, obviously there were moments when also he was the enemy. You know, he was not widely loved by the British fans, because when Nigel left, you know, people were pretty cross with Frank, and when I left as well, people were slightly annoyed with him. But he did what he needed to do to keep the team going, and when they could, if they were able to, he would have loved to have had a British driver winning in his car. When we had Renault, the deal was Prost won basically, but he always got a little bit of a wry kind of kick from seeing me win, especially when it was supposed to have been Renault's 50th Grand Prix victory or something like that, and I won the race, and they were supposed to present it to Alain Prost, but Frank was tickled pink that I'd won it.
Well, Damon, it's wonderful to hear from you. So thank you. And it is indeed a very sad time for Formula One, but it's great to hear the positivity with which you talk about him, and clearly the legacy that he has in Formula One and for his friends and everyone beyond the sport as well. So thank you so much for sharing those memories with us.
Oh, great to hear from Damon. And do you know what, Pinks? I completely bought into the whole Frank Williams story. The perseverance of that man throughout his life was quite extraordinary, wasn't it? How, you know, with no money, he decided he wanted to go racing, and he hooked up with his mate Piers Courage. And in 1969, they made the dream happen, financed by Piers. His mate was then killed at Zandvoort. Piers was then killed the following year. And yet Frank said, I'm going to keep going. I've got no money. I'm going to keep going. And keep going he did. He then ran out of options in 77 and sold the team to Walter Wolf. And yet he started again with Patrick Head, with Williams Grand Prix engineering the following season, and away they went. And then he has this car accident just as he's got all of his ducks in a row. They've got Honda Power coming good. They've got a rostrum of sponsors that are fantastic. And then at the start of 1986, he's paralysed, and yet he keeps going, and he has more success after that accident than he'd had before it. It's just, you know, Pinks, we all have days when you think, this is harder than I was expecting. The current coming against me was stronger than I was expecting. Well, just think of Frank. Just think of Frank, and it'll help you through.
Unbelievable. The absolute epitome of fighting adversity, tenacity, passion, you know. And I mean, I am too young to remember him before his accident, but I was always just blown away by his commitment to the team, to come to every race. It cannot have been easy to travel. And as we've touched upon, anyone that had the pleasure, the honour of being able to have a bit of interaction with him, he was very funny, you know. You hung on his every word because it wasn't easy for him to speak. You had to really kind of tune in and to hear him. But when you did, it was gold. And yeah, I feel very lucky to have met him. I've had lovely conversations with Claire about him. And, you know, as you say, massive amounts of tragedy in his life. Losing Ginny, who was the backbone of the family, must have been so full of trauma for all of them, and yet they still pull through. And losing Senna, and Claire has said as well that really affected him, because Senna was his hero, and to have him drive for the team and then only months later lose his life would have been another massive blow. But this is a guy that just kept getting back up and fighting against the odds. And as you say, an inspiration to so many who may want to throw the towel in, just to never to do so. 9
constructors' titles, 7 drivers' titles, and 114 wins. That's a legacy.
But beyond the stats, there's just something so very special about the Williams team, and that was created by that man.
So very special. And let's talk now to a man who knew Frank Williams, and he's now the CEO of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. It's Martin Whitaker. We'll come on to all things Jeddah in a moment. But can we start just by getting your thoughts and memories on the great man, Frank Williams?
Well, listen, I mean, what do you have to say about him? I mean, what a lovely man he was. Would you believe it? Yesterday, I've been trying to get hold of him on the phone in the last couple of weeks because I was going to write a foreword for a coffee table book that we're writing here, which we're going to have released after the Grand Prix. But just memories of him, just a lovely man. I mean, I was lucky to know him before his accident and obviously afterwards. I think he was always so accommodating. He always seemed to have time for you. I think people like myself, I'm sure you two were the same, would make time to go and find him in the paddock. Even if you didn't really have anything to say to him, it was nice, you knew he was there. It was almost like Uncle Frank. And so it was just nice to go and shake his hand and spend some time, crouch down by the wheelchair and have a few words with him. He'd wave his arms around. And it was just, I don't know, you could just share moments with him. And I think it was, I mean, in a way, I think people like us were extremely privileged to have known him.
Yes, just on that, how much of a legacy has he got on the sport? I mean, how much of a role has he played in the development of it? And we are ever likely to see someone of his kind again?
I suppose not, if we're frank. It's not just Sir Frank himself. It was the way he built the team. I think in a sense, he built the team just out of a pure love of the sport, that sort of fervent enthusiasm for going motor racing in a time when motor racing was so different. Back in that sort of era of the sort of the late 60s and early 70s. And think of the people that he's worked with, not just those that sat in the car, but the people that worked in the sport and who either plied their trade or learnt their trade at Williams and with Frank. And whether it was when he ran the team out of a telephone box in Didcot or the back of his van, he saw some great times. He saw some really bad times. He had times when he had no money. He had times when he had great sponsors. He epitomized everything that was good, I think, about the generation that all of us have come to love, and working with the drivers that he worked with and the technical people. Just extraordinary.
Am I right in thinking that you're going to be honouring Williams this weekend? Are we even going to see one of their cars running?
You're actually going to see 2. We're actually speaking with Stefano and his team at the moment. And we had a meeting actually this morning. We've given them some ideas. We're working with Alex Molina and the team that are already here on the ground to see what we can do to honour Frank. But yes, you're right. There was a Williams FW07, the number 4 chassis, that's been residing in a garage in Riyadh for the best part of 30 years without turning a wheel. And we decided back in May, June time to restore that car. And so we literally took it apart in the garage in Riyadh and shipped it back to Chris Mellor's operation in Bakewell in Derbyshire, MEM. And Chris is well known not only for his rally cars, but as for being a really fabulous engineer. And Chris has completely stripped the car down, rebuilt it in the most beautiful way. The restoration is quite superb. The car was actually flown back here again in bits 2 days ago. And so they've been working on it and they fired it up again this morning. They're due to run it on the runway, I think, tomorrow. And then we will be running it during the Grand Prix weekend. So, and the nice thing is we'll have a number of drivers driving it. I spoke to Damon last night. I think Damon's going to be one of the guys who will drive it. So it'll be great to see Damon driving the Williams again. We also will have the sports minister, Prince Abdulaziz, will also be driving the car. Prince Abdulaziz is he knows his way around a racing car. He's raced at Le Mans, he's raced at Spa 24 Hours. He won the Porsche Championship here in the Middle East a couple of years running. And of course, perhaps the icing on the cake is that Alan Jones will be here as well. So Alan will be with us for the race weekend, as you like, a bit of an ambassador for the car. And yes, I mean, sadly, the events of yesterday have added another sort of poignancy to the whole affair. But the nice thing is we'll be able to commemorate Frank's life, not only with the car on the track, but also working on the tribute to Frank on the grid on the Sunday. But how nice will it be to see this car and another one, the chassis number 1, which was built in 1979, seeing both those cars circulating around the track during the course of the Grand Prix weekend. And the reason I mentioned the coffee table book is because we've got some stunning images of the car being restored. And of course, that'll culminate in it running. And that's where it's so sad. I was literally yesterday morning starting to pen a forward to the book from Frank.
Oh, it's giving me goosebumps. Yeah.
Let's take a moment to hear from one of our sponsors now. So, Pinks, what's the first thing you do in the morning?
It's a rather personal question, TC.
Well, it is indeed, because I take my coffee very seriously. Because the first thing I do, I don't know about you, Pinks, is have a coffee.
No. Do you know, I probably would go for a green tea. Never had a cup of coffee, though.
I can't believe you have the travel schedule of someone working in Formula One and have never had a coffee. Extraordinary. I can't say the same about me. I love coffee, up to 5 cups a day.
What?
Yeah.
That can't be good for you.
Probably not, but I love it. It's my biggest vice. But there are downsides to too much caffeine and sugar, Pinks, because it can lead to a slump in my energy levels. So I end up in this cycle of energy boost, slump, energy boost, slump. And then I just end up drinking more and more coffee because I want the energy boost. It's not a great cycle, actually, when I think about it.
Well, I think I've got an answer to kicking that coffee habit. Mission Tea is a new range of 100% natural teas developed by sports scientists, no less, and designed for high performance. And let's face it, TC, you're all about high performance.
Oh, I am.
Mission Tea has become part of the daily routine of hundreds of elite athletes, business leaders, and more recently, F1 teams. It's like a green tea, but it releases less caffeine than a coffee into your body over a longer period of time. So you get a slow release of energy, meaning none of those nasty little mid-afternoon slumps, although I do love a little daytime nap.
Truth be told, Pinks, I'm aware of Mission Tea. Of course I am. It comes in a variety of flavours and you can take it hot or cold. So it's the perfect alternative if you're usually more of an iced coffee drinker too.
Mission has won several great taste awards and Sports Nutrition Product of the Year by Runner's World. So give Mission Tea a try and see the benefits for yourself. For an extra 20% off your next order with Mission, type NATION20 at checkout at missionuk.com. That's code NATION20, all one word, at missionuk.com. And now let's look forward to this race weekend because we're all very excited about coming out there. And for the listeners, there is actually a map of the track behind you and it looks phenomenal. Just how fast is it? Because I'm hearing all these rumours. Can we expect the fastest street circuit ever?
We certainly can. It's extremely fast. The track is just over 6 kilometres in length. It's very narrow. At its narrowest point, you can literally, less than 10 metres between one track and the other. And you'll see that when you get here. The other unique feature, of course, is that it's right on the shores of the Red Sea. So it's not even a stone's throw from the Red Sea. It's literally a lob from the Red Sea. But yes, to get back to the question, it is very fast. We think that the average speed will be in excess of 250 kilometers an hour. It's, I think, particularly unforgiving. I think one mistake here, like many street circuits, but one mistake here and you're going to be in the wall. The top speed, I imagine, will be something in the region of 320, 330 kilometers an hour going into the final corner, which is turn 27 corners. And some unique features on the track. We have one of the Premier Hospitality suites, for example, actually straddle both tracks. So you're going under it one way and you're coming back under it the other way as you return back to the start-finish line. It'll be extremely quick. As I've said, very demanding, fast with some challenging corners, an interesting parabolica corner at turn 13. And of course, all under lights. We will start the race at 8:30 here, which will be, I think, 5:30 in the UK. 670 must go lights all around the circuit. And you cannot believe how impressive this circuit looks at night. It's when you get here and you physically see the circuit and how the magnitude of it and the scale of it is just enormous. And all this, when you have to realize that it's actually a temporary circuit. I find you have to pinch yourself and just remind yourself this is actually a temporary circuit, not a permanent circuit.
Now, look, when did you finish it, Martin? There's been a lot of sort of chat about it's all been very last minute. When did the circuit get finished?
Well, I think probably let's turn the question around. First of all, Tom, we started building it in the first week of May. I can't think of any other circuit that's been built in as little time as that. I think we managed to get a Guinness Book of Records for our recent construction of a Lego car. Full-size Lego car. I think we're probably going to get a Guinness Book of Records certificate for the fastest building or construction of a Formula One circuit. But yeah, so it started in May. It is now finished. The track is 100% finished. Michael Massey was with us. Well, he's here with us now. He arrived yesterday. He's obviously been with us on a number of occasions during the last few months. And I have to say, Michael and his team have been fantastic, as have the team at Biggin Hill with Ross Brawn and Andrew Bibby and Richard Springett and Steve Nielsen. They've been totally supportive throughout the whole piece. We've had weekly meetings with them. I think the important thing from our side is we've always been incredibly transparent with them. We've been completely honest about where we are. If we've had problems, we said, look, we've got problems. I think they genuinely appreciated that. So they shared the difficulties, they shared the challenges with us, and they've been extraordinarily supportive. But yeah, we're ready to go. I can understand that people would have had doubts, naturally, especially when, as I said earlier on, when you see the size of the place. But yeah, we're ready to go. I mean, listen, there's clearly things still being put up right now. The gantries are going up, sports signage are in doing all the signage, road grip are in doing the track markings. The teams are now in furnishing the garages. And it's beginning to feel like a real racing track. Now, you know the thing yourself. You go to a racetrack anywhere else in the world, it's only really in the last week that it starts to come together anyway. The great thing is we've got a fantastic team here, a majority of them being young people. 40% of them, by the way, are female, which is really encouraging. It's a great, vibrant team. And look, sure, we're going to make mistakes and sure, we're not going to get everything right, but that's the way it is. But the nice thing is they're fervently passionate and proud that they've got a Formula One Grand Prix on the streets of Jeddah.
Well, I was going to ask that. What is the mood like over there? What's the anticipation that's building to receive the world of Formula One to the shores of the Red Sea?
First of all, Natalie, I mean, the Saudis love their cars. And also, don't forget, 75% of the population here are under the age of 35. There's a huge appetite for motorsport here in the country. And let's face it, as we all know, there's no bigger platform and no bigger showcase or shop window for motorsport than a Formula One event. And with the countless millions, if not hundreds of millions of people who are going to watch the race in Saudi this coming weekend, frightening to say this coming weekend, it's going to be extraordinary to see so many people here. And most importantly, the pride that the local people have in this race. This is a vibrant society. The young people here are no different from the people that we have in Europe and around the world. They are absolutely fascinated in what's going on. They are just embracing this in the most extraordinary fashion. So I think we're going to see not only great support this year, but an increasing level of support in the years to come. And of course, don't forget, our next race is in March.
Knowing the track as you do and being a keen follower of the sport as you are, who's going to win it on Sunday?
I tell you, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think Max is going to love the speed, and I think Lewis is going to love the speed. I think Lewis is going to really, really love the challenge of this track. The grip level is extraordinarily high, by the way. We believe so with the two operations in sense of construction, the company that have constructed, the main lead contractor is a company called Unimac, a Saudi company, driven obviously with the architects at Tilke. They've constructed a track that has amazing grip. So I think some of the highest grip levels that we're going to see on a Formula One circuit. And that was an important consideration for us, because obviously the last thing you need is a slippery surface. The good thing is we're right on the coast. So our dust levels will not be as much as they would be perhaps on a circuit that was further inland. But yeah, to get back to the question, I think everybody's just going to love the opportunity to race here. Who's going to win? Oh, I really don't know.
Well, the great news for us is it's not long until we find out. So just to remind you, it's Max Verstappen who leads the championship by 8 points. And for him to take his first world title in Saudi Arabia, he would have to win the race and Lewis would have to finish 6th or lower. Unlikely, not impossible. What do you reckon, Tom?
Well, I think Lewis has got a rocket ship, is what I think, Pinks. He's going to be putting that Sao Paulo spec power unit back into the car for this race. So as long as he finishes, I think he'll do enough to keep the championship alive until Abu Dhabi. I sense, speaking to Martin, that there might be a bit of jeopardy. A very narrow track, very high speed. You know, we're going to, as you say, we haven't got long to find out. But I'm starting to feel nervous just about the whole championship fight now. In 2 weeks' time, we will know who has won the 2021 World Championship and how those guys deal with the pressure and the expectation on their shoulders is something else. I know I couldn't do it.
Well, funny you should say that, Tom, because we have now got a man coming on the show who can offer us a unique insight into just that. His name is Dr. Riccardo Ceccarelli, and he founded the company Formula Medicine, specializing working with racing drivers. Delighted for you to join us and just tell us at this stage of the season, how much of the driver's preparation is mental versus physical?
I would say, to be not too dramatic, but I would say 99% mental and 1% physical, I would say, because they are so fit and they don't need anything extra. Now it's just to manage the psychological pressure. And that's, in my opinion, the most important things. But I would like to add, it's not only Max and Lewis, it's also the team, the strategy, because we saw that the team can be also the key point for a result in negative and in positive terms. And we saw already during the season. So it's important, all the teamwork, not only the drivers.
So Riccardo, if you were working with Lewis or Max coming into these races, what would you be saying to them now?
Well, I would say, first of all, they are two different persons. So we have to respect also how they are. Lewis has an advantage that has won already 7 world championships. And that's obviously make him more used to this kind of pressure. But at the same time, not many times he faced a so tough competition. And so, especially in the last year, so for him can be a pressure, I would say, similar to Djokovic. Did you see in the tennis, Djokovic, he could win the match of the life, to win 4 slams and to be the first one to arrive to 21 slams, and he failed for the excessive pressure. So for me, Lewis is a bit in the condition of Djokovic, a lot of pressure, because that can be the last 2 races of his life. 8-time world championship is a record that no one will beat, probably for age. On the other side, obviously, Max is willing to win because it can be the first championship. But at the same time, probably I go against what people think. Probably he has less pressure because he's young. He has many other opportunities in the future. So maybe the pressure is less in Max, in my opinion. It's more Lewis that in the moment has everything to lose. And there is another point which people, obviously, when we talk about these two drivers, first of all, big respect, because what they are doing is amazing. I have a huge respect for them, but in my opinion, mentally, Max is a little bit stronger compared to Lewis. Max is that kind of character that is only focused on himself. He has a huge self-confidence. Lewis is looking for support, external support. Is that kind of person you see in the team radio, how much he talks. He's looking for security, is asking, but the strategy is correct. Max is never doing this. Or he's trying to have the support of the people, of the fans you saw with the Brazilian flag or in UK's. And he has a physio which is always with him, never jumping 1 meter. No one knows who is the physio of Max. So Lewis is the one that needs to create a familiar environment that protects him. Max is the kind of driver that he doesn't need anyone around him. He needs himself.
Do you think, though, in fairness to Lewis, he's much more exposed than Max? I mean, he's a global superstar who comes in for criticism and praise. He's had to cope with a lot more than Max externally from the sport.
When I started to work with the drivers, after some years, I was dividing the drivers in two categories. The extreme, I call the sponge and the waterproof. So the sponge can be affected by negative situation around him. Waterproof means nothing is going inside. A classic example of an extreme waterproof driver is Raikkonen. Raikkonen, nothing is affecting the criticism, the journalist, the nothing. It's just completely waterproof. Nothing is getting inside. Nothing is affecting on his performance. Okay. Max is a little bit similar to this example because he can be affected by many things outside the accident, the criticism. Is always the same. Is always Max, and nothing is affecting him. Lewis is a little bit more sponge. He needs to feel the positive, the people that likes him, that encourage him. He is more social, is more, I don't say one is better, one is negative. I don't say it's not a judgment, it's just two different characters.
Riccardo, have you had Lewis or Max to your mental gym in Viareggio?
I never had the chance to work with Lewis, and I have been the doctor in Toro Rosso in Red Bull, so I know Max very well. We never did this kind of work with Max because, as I told you, he doesn't need. There are some drivers you don't need to touch. For example, he remembered me a lot. If I had to compare Max, I can compare to Kubica. And because they are that kind of driver, they have a huge self-confidence, they know what to do, and we can work with them only if they need, if they ask, if they show some weakness. But if they don't show weakness, don't touch.
I think you told me in the past that you've worked with 76 Formula One drivers.
Now they are 80.
80. There we are. I haven't spoken to you for too long. But of the 80, who has been the most impressive for you?
For me, it was Kubica. Kubica and now Max. They are the one that, as I told you, they need less my support. Just only when they are young, just only to learn, just don't do mistakes. Okay, just don't do mistakes in the physical training, in the nutrition, but that they become completely independent, and it means that they know exactly what they need and what they want to do. For us, one of the most important things, especially we see like 200 drivers every year here in the mental gym, from kids 7 years old, and we have also some drivers from Beijing, the race Beijing-Paris, and they are 77 years old. So we have from 7 to 77, honestly, no kidding. And when you see many young drivers, you see a lot of problem, and that's why someone is not becoming professional. One of the most important points is the self-awareness. Self-awareness is the corner point. Who is going to develop a huge self-awareness is going to improve. All the drivers that I met in the past, Senna, Schumacher. They had so huge self-awareness. They knew how they were, and they knew exactly where they could improve, and they were always focused to see where they could improve. So a big self-awareness. That means I can manage what I know. So if I know myself, I can better manage myself. So self-awareness is the most important thing we evaluate in a young driver, and is the one that we try to stimulate. If I have to say about Max and Lewis, they have obviously huge self-awareness. And I was impressed for me by Kubica and Max, because even if they were super young, they have a self-awareness like a 30 years old person. When Max was coming in Toro Rosso, was the doctor of Toro Rosso, he was only 17. He was acting like a 30 years old person. No problem, no. He knew already what he needed. He knew how to manage himself. So for me, I would say for sure Kubica and Max, they are the one that most impressed me in the past.
And in your opinion, Riccardo, is that nature or nurture? Do you think that Max was taught that by his parents, or do you think it's just in his DNA?
DNA, for me, is DNA. Obviously, the education is important, but the education can modify a bit. But the DNA is like the fundamental of a building. If there is no strong DNA, you cannot build up a high building. So DNA is fundamental. That's why we do also scouting in our facility, because when they are 12, 13, 14, we can see immediately who has the DNA to become a top driver. We don't judge the talent, obviously. So we leave to judge the talent to someone else. But the DNA, we can see when they are already 12, 13.
This is fascinating.
Isn't it just?
Love it. I just love it, because, you know, in a sport where the margins are so small, someone like Riccardo can make all the difference, can't you? I mean, you can help make a champion. Yeah,
sure. What is important is this in our work. As I told you, we see so many young drivers, so many go-kart drivers, and what we try to transmit there is like an education. So be focused on yourself, develop your self-awareness, be critical with yourself. As soon as you jump out of a go-kart, of a car, first of all, ask to you what I did wrong, what can I improve on myself. And this is the best approach. The top driver, normally when I talk with the engineer, the top driver, they jump out of the car and they can say, I did a mistake, I lost 2/10 of a second in corner 5, but the car is too much understeering, for example. So they are able to split car and their mistakes. This is the mentality of the top driver.
So, Riccardo, Natalie says you can help make a champion. Do you think you have made a champion in Max Verstappen? Who's your money on, Lewis or Max?
In my opinion, in this moment, as I told you, Max probably is like Medved, and Lewis is like Djokovic. So Lewis can be the legend, so he can have even more pressure than Max. But probably in this moment, Mercedes has a little bit something more. So I think it will be very tight, difficult to say. I hope they will arrive at the last race with the same points, so we can see like the World Championship, written by Hitchcock, that will be a thriller until the last corner. I hope in this, and then who is going to win deserve, because they are two top champions, and I have a lot of respect for them.
And we, Riccardo, have a lot of respect for you. That is such a brilliant insight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Riccardo, thanks for your time. We really appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you out there in Saudi.
Thanks to you. Thank you.
Well, Tom, I think you could probably apply the sponge versus waterproof analogy to anyone in life, don't you?
Oh, 100%.
But he's right, because it's shades of grey. I think you can be sponge-like, and on occasions, Teflon. Oh,
it's just, I found that a really, really interesting chat with Riccardo. He knows racing drivers. He's been working with them for 30 years. He's had, as he said, 80 Formula One drivers through his doors. Yeah, fascinating. Riccardo, what a legend.
Okay, so not long now. You're off tomorrow. I'm on Wednesday, jetting off to Jeddah. I'll see you there. Can't wait.
See you there, Pinks. I mean, I'll say it again. The World Championship is about to be decided, and we're going to be there on site to witness it. Too close to call. Sponge, waterproof, whatever. It's going to be a great race.
F1 Nation is a podcast produced by Formula One in association with Audio Boom Studios.